My fellow ARs, we must import more Dracos to ensure the economic growth of our Second Amendment. Many of you may know, but I'm not a particular fan of bullpups.
Motherfucking bullpup hates you too.
I find them ugly, short, disproportionate, and somewhat awkward to handle compared to their AR counterparts. But when the biggest supporter of the channel, Ajewdication, asked if I wanted to play around with his X95 for a little one, no strings attached, I said yes. Now, full disclosure, of course, I have no relationship with IWI, and they don't know I exist until this video goes live. We're not really going to be going over the history of the X95 and its life as the Israeli service weapon, or their PCE, but more going over the specifics of this rifle and what I found to be the best way to set it up and to actually get some performance out of it. First up with the basics is that the version I have here is a 16.5-inch 5.56. These retail for roughly $1,500, although I have seen them go considerably lower, so in terms of bullpups, they are relatively inexpensive to everything not the Keltec RFB. And of course, these are made in Israel and imported by IWI USA. Starting out up front, we have a A2 style muzzle device, though it is not quite accurate, but it does resemble an A2. The barrel itself is a Cold Hammer Forge 16.5-inch 5.56 chamber 1-in-7 twist black nitride affair. It is somewhat on the lighter end of the spectrum in terms of 5.56 barrels, and I will say that these are somewhat falsely maligned as inaccurate, though that is not the results I got with my specific example. Now, moving back to the main body, it is the strangest amalgamation of plastic, aluminum, cotter pins, roll pins, nuts, bolts, screws, and blood libel that I've ever seen. In fact, I'm not sure if there is another modern rifle on the market with more individual parts than the X95. If you'll notice, the front of the handguard is quite enlarged, though it does have these 3 plastic rail panels that hide your plastic quad rail underneath, and you can simply depress the little detents to slide them off if you actually want to have some additional Picatinny. The entire top rail is aluminum, and it is then pinned and screwed to the rest of the chassis, and it seems to retain zero for the most part. Keep in mind that the Picatinny at 3, 6, and 9 are plastic, so if you're going to mount something that needs to retain zero on them, I simply wouldn't. Also of note is the top rail does include flip-up iron sights that are metal. However, if you attach any serious amount of performance modifiers to your top rail, those will become completely unusable, so I simply didn't use them. Now, moving down to the grip itself, you don't have a trigger guard, you have a hand guard. For your firing hand, you have all of your controls, AR style safety. If we want to talk about the trigger for just a second, the stock trigger on the Tavor is pretty bad like most bullpup triggers. It's very similar in terms of annoyance to... The Balfour Declaration was a public statement written by Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary at the time, to Lord Rothschild, who was the leader of the Zionist Federation of Great Britain. Within the document, it expressed a desire for a home for Zionist ambitions in what was Ottoman-controlled Palestine and set the stage for what would come later. Fortunately, Geisley makes a trigger pack for the X95, and that is actually what is installed currently, so this trigger is actually pretty darn good. So the trigger itself has a bunch of slop, 3-4 millimeters of take up. You hit a pretty defined wall, roll through, maybe a 4.5-5 pound break. The trigger itself is not much to write home about, but the pull itself, honestly not bad. And the reset, it's pretty darn short. So the Geisley trigger pack, if you are serious about running the X95, I think they're pretty expensive, $400 or $500, but it is a significant upgrade. Something else that the X95 does very well is that the controls are very well laid out. You have a AR style magazine release, which while it is a little more stiff because of course it has a lot of distance to cover, it works very well and the mags drop freely. On top of that, both the charging handle is ambidextrous and can be swapped to either side, as well as the ejection port. Now that does cause some issues when shooting suppressed, which we'll get into in just a minute. The only other notable controls is on the back of the X95, we have both our bolt release and our bolt hold open. So if you did want to lock the bolt back, you'd simply pull the charging handle back while pulling up on this tab. And if you needed to drop the bolt, reinsert your mag, push up with your thumb, and the bolt goes home. The X95 also comes with 5 different QD points built in, so however you want to set up your sling, you probably can. Now at the back, we simply have a rubber butt pad, which brings the overall length on the 16.5-inch version to a hair over 28 inches. While the size is certainly impressive for a 16-inch rifle, the weight comes in at just under 8 pounds. Now that is 1.5 pounds heavier or more than a standard AR, but you are gaining or losing about 6 inches in terms of length. Some people will enjoy the shorter, handier nature of the X95, while others will not enjoy the weight penalty. It really depends how you are personally using it and what you prefer with your body dynamics.
Kinesthetic alignment.
So now let's go ahead and talk about the operating system, shootability, and problems. On July 22nd, 1946, Zionist terrorists bombed the King David Hotel, which was the headquarters of the British Mandatory Authorities of Palestine. This act of terrorism resulted in 91 deaths and the injuries of 46 further individuals. The attack was carried out by the militant Zionist organization Irgun in response to Operation Agatha. The goal of the attack was to destroy incriminating documents obtained in the previously mentioned operation. These documents would have further implicated Irgun and the Haganah in additional terrorist attacks throughout the West and Palestine. Starting off, this is a long stroke piston operating system that runs off of a single internal recoil spring. The spring weight is very strong from the factory. It feels like a enhanced power spring on an AR-15, but it does have to slow down a lot of mass inside of the X95. That leads to the shooting performance when unsuppressed being unremarkable for a 5.56, especially an 8-pound 5.56. Something that I have noticed, maybe it's just a feature of the height over bore or the way that the gun is set up, but with either a A2 flash hider or a Nox 9 neutral, it does tend to push the muzzle down very aggressively.
I don't know if that's gonna work. That Nox like hammers the gun at 25 yards like a foot down. Like I have to just wait for the dot to come back up.
Most of the time I was shooting the X95, I had it set up with a 3-prong reared-in flash hider, which of course is non-compensating, and that felt the most natural. In that configuration, I would consider it a soft-ish recoiling gun, though nothing compared to what you can get out of a well-tuned AR. The biggest problem here is going to be on the morning of June the 8th, 1967, Israeli airships engaged the USS Liberty, killing 34 soldiers and injuring a further 171. Israeli leadership quickly claimed that the attack was a mistake due to confusion about the ship's identity. However, other accounts disagree, with sailors on the USS Liberty claiming that they made visual contact with the pilots well before the attack commenced. These claims go all the way up to Thomas Moore, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, who accused the then President Lyndon B. Johnson of directly covering up a deliberate attack. Also problematic is shooting the X95 with a suppressor. The way the system is designed with the long stroke piston is that this is not an adjustable system. On top of that, you only have a single recoil spring in the back and a huge mass of metal, so adding additional back pressure via a standard blowback can makes the whole system run miserably. On top of that, you also have an ejection port on the left-hand side, which of course can be swapped from right to left because the system is designed to be ambidextrous. However, this big cutout in the receiver allows all that additional back pressure to go straight into the user's face. Perhaps at this point in time, there's some sort of natural adaptation going on there, but I digress. Now, there are two solutions to this problem, one a stopgap and the other final. The first solution is to buy the gasket kit that will seal off the left side of your receiver and install a suppressor-rated spring on the inside. The problem with that, of course, is that you are now tuned to only run suppressed, and your reliability when unsuppressed may be suspect. The best solution, the most expensive one, of course, is to just buy a very expensive fancy flow-through can and not deal with any of the problems with traditional high back pressure cans. Wrapping up the shootability, suppressed is basically a no-go unless I had some sort of flow-through can, which unfortunately I do not. However, when using a neutral muzzle device and without a suppressor on there, I actually enjoyed shooting it quite a bit. I found it to be quite pleasant. It's a little more jumpy than your standard AR. However, with that additional 2 pounds of bullpup on here, I felt that it was very controllable and easy to make shots even at distance. And now that sort of brings us to accuracy. I didn't do any dedicated accuracy testing on the X95 in terms of match loads. However, I needed to do some comparisons between a blown out 14.5 barrel on an AR that was not maintaining accuracy and something that I thought would perform quite poorly. Fortunately, when I tested the X95 with 3 different 55 grain M193 loads, they all grouped between 2 and 2.5 MOA, which is perfectly acceptable for any gun using standard ball ammo. And when equipped with a Leupold 2.5 to 8, I was able to clear a Know Your Limits rack, a 4-inch plate at 150 yards, again just using standard boring ball ammunition. Is it the most accurate match DMR rifle ever created? No, but it's certainly capable of picking off Palestinian children, engaging targets at out to 600 yards with just standard military supplied ammunition. So the accuracy is pretty good. The shootability when unsuppressed with a neutral muzzle device is acceptable, but the main reason why I would never personally run one of these for any reason is going to be the height over bore and the complications in setting the thing up. So what we have here is a acceptable setup, in my opinion, for a general purpose bullpup. So we have a 4-in-1 SMS laser unit up front. So we have white light, IR illuminator, vis laser, IR laser, everything in one package that I can reach with just a standard grip, even with my smallish hands. Moving back, we have a SIG Romeo 8T, which won't accidentally shoot me, which is a great plus of the SIG optics division, and then a primary arms micro 3x magnifier. And the optics are sitting on top of one of the new BCM risers, which I like quite a bit. One of the downsides of bullpups is that because they are perfectly in line, I feel like a 1.93 2-inch height is most comfortable. Some people like them even taller, but this is kind of what I feel is appropriate for me personally. The problem that creates is nearly 5 inches height over bore. Nearly 5 inches. So depending on your zero distance, for instance, if you have a 50-yard zero, your angle is nearly double what it would be on a standard AR-15 with only 2.6 inches height over bore. With something like this, I would only ever recommend a 100-yard zero because, again, that height over bore. Now, something that you're never going to get away from, and a reason why I would never run something like this in competition, is because of that height over bore. You have to aim at the top of the A zone to hit inside of the A zone, and if there's no shoots or partial targets, it makes everything much more difficult than just aim at a spot and pull the trigger. Is it awful? No. Is it capable? Mostly. Does it do anything well enough that I would overlook its many flaws? Also, no. This is a novelty piece if you're one of those special people who's really into bullpups for some reason. Bullpups weren't really my thing before I put a couple thousand rounds on the X95, and after, still much the same, though I'm not entirely sure which group of people is worse, bullpup people or AK people. Go ahead and comment your favorite group in the comments down below. But with all that out of the way, gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Christ is King.
Motherfucking poop up face you too.